Is this on? It's a question from Emil from the live stream, and it's directed towards Onkar. Could you elaborate on the statement that evil is impotent and metaphysically insignificant, especially in the context of the fact that evil ideas continue to persist?
Okay, so if we go back to part of what I talked about, but then Keith, Aaron were talking about the conception of good and the conception of evil in the objectivist theory. The conception of the good is that it's the rational. So it's the source of all the creative energy and products that exist in the world. To the extent that we have life-serving values, they were created by people using their mind and then putting that into action to actually create the values that life requires. So that the human life requires production. This is part of why productiveness is a central virtue in objectivism. Everything created is created by the mind and then action. So the driving and powerful force in the world is the good. What the evil is, by contrast, is the non-rational or the anti-rational. It's the irrational. It's the rejection of reason. But what that means is it's the rejection of production. It's the rejection of the achievement and production of values on any scale. And so the view in objectivism, and it's a radical view and a very important, is that evil left to itself, left to its own devices, is impotent. It collapses. It cannot do anything. Its whole source of power comes from the good. And it comes from the good either unknowingly or knowingly supporting it. If you take it just at the realm of foreign policy, if you think after or even before into the prequel and aftermath of World War II, Ayn Rand's view, which I agree with completely, is you should have let the Soviet Union collapse of its own impotence. Instead, what happened is the West supported it. It supported it morally in World War II. We treated Stalin like he's a legitimate leader. We cooperated with them. The US gave them money and aid. And then you had a whole host of scientists sympathetic to communism who leaked all kinds of secrets, including atomic secrets, to Russia. And then you wonder, well, they have a bomb and so on. It's made possible by the inconsistency of the good not willing to name that this is evil and we will not deal with it. The same you could say for Putin and Russia today. It's the power has come from the West treating Putin as though he's a legitimate leader. Yeah, he poisons his political rivals and so on. He oppresses people in Russia. He attacks Georgia, but he's in the UN. And there he's as respectable. Russia's as respectable as the US. We're all on the Security Council and so on. You give that kind of legitimacy, both morally and material, to evil regimes, and then they seem like, oh, they wield a lot of power and so on. But the power doesn't come from them. The power comes from the good who serves them, either willingly or unwillingly and unknowingly. And part of the whole story of Atlas Shrugged is if the good withdraw, so this is what to say, withdraw your sanction, withdraw your approval of evil and withdraw your support of evil, it collapses. So that's the view that it's metaphysically impotent. And that's compatible with evil enduring for centuries. And this was about evil ideas and so on. If they're not named and exposed and then shunned, yeah, they will endure for centuries. If you treat altruism, which Ayn Rand regards as evil, if you treat it as the essence of morality, and then you wonder, well, why is it around for so long? Well, you've treated it as it's the essence of the good. And so it's a radical position in objectivism, but I think it's enormously important.
So my question is, is emotionalism the root of all evil, and is this a good way to put it?
I mean, the way Ayn Rand puts it is that it's the willful blindness, is the ability to shut off your mind, to not look at facts that you don't have to know. You don't have to know what you're doing, and it's that kind of thing that is the root of evil. Is there a way you could boil that down to ultimately this is emotionalism? I think you could. I don't know what you think about that, Onkar, but I think you could boil that down, because what's the motive in the end? What's the motive for not wanting to see? What's the motive for just covering your eyes and destroying? What is the motive? It's I don't want to see, and that is an emotional reaction.
Yeah, I would say it's a certain form of emotionalism. Emotionalism is a pretty broad phenomenon, and if you say that in some area of a person's life they're operating on emotions, not really on thought, that can be really corrupt, and that can be for more understandable reasons. So if you have some artist who we're pounded with the view that art is beyond reason and so on. And if they think, and in some ways are operating, like I'm operating in a more inspirational way and I don't really think about what I'm doing and so on, that I don't think that's true, and I don't think it's right, but it's not the essence of evil. But when one of the ways she put it, and this is one of the ways she characterized what evil amounts to when you get it on a grand scale is to place a whim or an I wish above an it is, and to knowingly do that it's what I want is my whims to work. And for instance, a dictator, and like a Putin is like this. And why is the environment that everybody's scared to tell him the truth? Everybody's scared, like we're failing in the Ukraine. We have no idea what we're doing. Our army sucks. Nobody will tell this to him, because the atmosphere in this kind of regime is he wants his whims to rule, and you have to cater to his whims and pretend that his whims actually do control reality. But they don't control reality. But the whole method of operating is that is what he wants. And that is corrupt. And that is a form of emotionalism, but not every form of emotionalism looks like that.
And also when you talk about an ism, I mean, I think it's relevant that it's not like you got emotional. Like, it's like this is your central rule in life, that you put an I wish above it is, you put your emotions above reality or your perception of reality. And that's how you characteristically function, versus you're in an argument with your wife or whatever it is, and your friends or something, and you start to realize this is like a snowball going downhill, and it's picking up momentum, and you start to realize my focus on the facts and what's true is no longer what's driving this. I'm trying to win. And then that can happen sometimes, but it's not like that's how I live my life. But so I wouldn't put that as an ism. It's just, you let your emotions sort of take over in effect in the short range.
It's also interesting how many people use it as an excuse for doing bad things. Imagine a football player in the 5th minute, he gets a red card because he tackles someone with both legs. He's like, hey, it's the 5th time. Why are you doing that? It's like, I can't control my emotions. But the way he puts it as an excuse is as if there is some virtue in it. Well, what can I do? I'm someone driven by emotions. And that's some good in it and some bad in it. This time the bad thing overtook. So quite often I hear it as a cheap excuse in terms of, that's who I am. I'm overrun by emotions. There's nothing else I can do. I'm a passionate man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So firstly, we heard from Yaron yesterday that a market on the use of force isn't a good thing. And similarly, we heard from Nikos that it took him some time to get over to internalize what's so wrong with competing markets when it's to do with the use of force. Given that, it seems to me that with voluntary taxation, in some sense, you have an entity that we'll call the objective government, which provides a service in exchange for taxation. If one government were to do a worse service than a different one, would you expect to see the same market pressures that you would do with any other service? Namely, you would see people going from the worse, the less good objective government to the better one? And if so, how does that differ from any other market on the use of force?
So people voting with their legs, as they say, like leaving California and going to Texas, but you mean at the level of leaving, let's say, Belgium and going to Luxembourg?
If they were objectivist states, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that would happen. I mean, so
It does happen.
it happens with non-objectivist governments.
My wife left France and came to the US.
So how is that market different from a market the types that Yaron and Nikos talk about?
It's not a market.
Pardon?
Well, I wouldn't categorize that as a market. I mean, there's a broader sense in which, well, there are different values out there that I could pursue that are sort of, in effect, I don't know if you put on offer, but that you could go for. But I don't think of it as a market in terms of, it's a business. Like, it's a government, they have guns, and that's not what a business is. So I don't think of it in terms of a market.
So I suspect your questions come in from a kind of libertarian perspective.
If you want to use that word.
The L word.
So there's a difference between a market and a free market. Or there's a difference between trade and free trade. So trade has existed for I don't know how many thousands of years. That doesn't mean we had a free market or we had free trade. So the fact that you have some exchanges, and you can even view, like when a mafia comes into a city and says, this is what we're doing, so there's still trade that takes place. It's not free trade. So, and it's not a free market. So there's an equivocation when it said it's a market. What we're talking about is a free market. And what a free market is you've extracted the use of the initiation of force from the interactions among the people, and that anyone who uses force will be penalized. The police will descend upon them if they're able to detect it and so on. That's what it means when you have a free market. So you have a whole apparatus that has been created to extract force from the market. The trade, as I say, has existed for thousands of years, including all kinds of force involved in those trades. The same is true of anarchy. So part of the libertarian projection is, let's try anarchy. It's been tried. We've had competitions in force. Anytime you don't have a monopoly government in a certain region, you have a competition then in using force. And in Europe, I mean, for centuries, you've had different tribes coming in, the Vikings come in, and then you get exploited by the government. So it's not one monopoly government. Or in the feudal system, it's not one monopoly government. It's all kinds of people using force in different ways against you, and you're a hapless victim of that. So it's a massive achievement to realize, okay, what force is detrimental to human life, and what we need to do is extract it from the economy. That requires, to do it well, it requires a monopoly government. And it's not that it's the end of trade, or it's the start of free trade to do that. And then it's in that sense, so it's not a market or a free market in force. It's the extraction of force in order to create a free market.
And secondly, how would an objectivist state actually establish itself? The geographical area that it operates in, or that it has authority over.
In the same way that, say, the U.S. So the creation of the U.S. is essentially a positive achievement, and it would be like that you get it's just as governments can devolve, so they can evolve, and you can get something better. And if we had people, and it, again, doesn't have to be unanimous, and it doesn't really have to even be a majority, of people who wanted better government, we could create better government. You could do it in Canada, you could do it in the UK, you could do it in the US and so on, and it would be those geographical boundaries.
Thank you.
Ayn Rand's theory of free will seems very unscientific to me, especially since neuroscientists argue about this for decades. So what would you say about that?
What's unscientific?
Ayn Rand's theory of free will, that we have free
What's
will.
unscientific about it?
Like to say we have free will because I can feel it.
What's unscientific about that?
Yeah, I mean,
Put it
you know,
this way. What's unscientific? Like, I see her. What's unscientific about that? I feel kind of
Or
depressed.
what's the alternative?
I feel,
as opposed to what?
I feel kind of depressed.
It's too self-evident.
Yeah, but I mean, couldn't it be that we don't have free will, but it just seems to us that we have free will? How would you prove that? That it's not just seeming to us that we have free will, but we really have it?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that is no, but it's true that that is a common argument. Yeah, so I'm not denying what you see, I'm saying it's an illusion. But then the question is, on what grounds are they saying it's an illusion? And the two dominant ones are, one, an appeal to science, that science shows that everything's determined. I don't think science shows that, and I don't think most scientists think that that is true of the world today. And if you take just at the quantum level, I don't think physicists think that that's true, that the universe is determined in the sense that you just look at antecedent factors and that will tell you what is going to happen, which will tell you what is going to happen, which is going to tell you what. They don't accept that as a picture of the universe. So that argument is out, that the appeal to science. And the other appeal is an appeal to causality, that what causality is one event followed, and there's a prior event, which is the cause of this event, and that has a prior event, which is the cause of that event, and so on. So causality is in terms of events and a sequence of events, and an event causes another event. That's a philosophical account or theory of causality that comes into existence, Renaissance, Enlightenment, at least prevalence at that time. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong philosophically that that is what cause and effect is. So objectivism is rejecting that as an account of cause and effect. It's not rejecting cause and effect. It's rejecting this account or this theory of cause and effect. That a cause is the thing, the effect is its action. The thing is causing its action. And in that sense, cause and effect are simultaneous. It's not essentially a notion about a sequence going back in time. And if you accept that as the right account of causality, then free will is compatible and is a form of causality. You're the cause. You're causing it, not something in the past. You're causing it now. And then the determinist position is incoherent. So the determinist position is, yeah, I don't know why I do anything I do, or I hold any idea that I hold. It's some antecedent factors, but I can't specify which ones. I can't predict what I'm going to do or what anybody else is. I don't know what the factors are that have caused me to do what I do, or to think what I think, to accept what I accept as true, and to accept what I accept as false. So his position is, yeah, I was determined to accept determinism. You're determined to accept free will. Why does he think he's right and I'm wrong?
There's no such thing as right and wrong in that context, I think. Because, I mean, one apple falls from a tree and one doesn't. Which one was right? I don't know. Some factors necessitated the dropping of one apple, and some factors led to the other one remaining on the vine, on the tree. You couldn't evaluate them. Because, if you literally have, the view is, also the issue of control. It's one thing you don't know what the antecedent factors is determinism means is you have no control over the use of your mind. You have no control over which conclusions you accept as true or false, plausible or implausible, well-founded, ill-founded, convincing, unconvincing. You have no control whatsoever over any of that. None. And nor does this advocate of free will over here. And so it's like, so which one's right? None are right. Both are causally necessitated. There's no such thing as right or wrong anymore. Those epistemological concepts that presuppose free will. And so there's no getting out of that. That's the incoherent part. You can't assert that I've used my mind correctly to reach the truth and you did something wrong. There's no such thing as wrong. On that view.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. I have a problem with Gail Wynand, and could he have chosen not to betray Rourke? And
So
if
could
not,
you have chosen
not to betray Rourke.
A betrayer.
And if he couldn't, was it because his character was already too bad to do it? And I also had trouble finding an example of Wynand in real life.
Yeah. So if you're interested in this, I have an essay there's a book, Essays on Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, edited by Robert Mayhew. I have an essay in there that deals with Wynand. It's not only on Wynand, but there's a long section on understanding Wynand as a character. Could he have chosen not to betray Rourke? Yes. And that's Rourke's perspective on Wynand, and it's Dominique's perspective on Wynand. If you're saying it's a choice, then you've got the ability to select between these alternatives. So he chooses to betray Rourke at the end. The reason that he does it is he has a certain perspective on his own life that I think is correct. So he has a perspective on his own life at the end that it was a waste, and more than that it was a waste, that he consciously chose to betray what he actually values. And both Rourke and Dominique, in a certain way, think, yeah, but you could redeem yourself. But his view of himself is, no, this is beyond forgiveness. I cannot forgive myself for what I have done. And so it's put as it amounts to a kind of suicide at the end. And in the movie, it's a literal suicide. Sorry for the plot spoiler. So it's a perspective that what he did was wrong. Indeed, what he did was evil. And I think that is the right perspective on him. And so it's not, yes, he could have chosen, but there's a reason he makes the choice now, that he thinks it's, if you put it in this way, and it's pretty close to this in regard to Wynand. Yeah, I've killed some people, but you should forgive me now because look at what I've done great now. Like he thinks like that's crazy to do that. So it's he views himself as guilty, and I'm going to pay the cost of the in effect the sins I've committed, and I'm not going to put those costs on somebody else.
Is there something virtuous to these though? Virtuous in terms of realizing the essence of how bad life has been?
Yeah.
Because what you said, it's like a death. Remember the scene when Rourke tries to see him after and writes him a letter and he says, I don't want to see you. And then he sees him as an architect to build the last skyscraper, and he deals with him as if he's seeing him for the first time. There is everything, all the energy between them is lost, so it's like, I'm dead. I'm literally dead. There's nothing living in me. So, but do you think there's something, so what would be more virtuous? To accept the monstrosity of the things he did before and go the way he went, or to say, okay, now I changed my mind, forgive me?
But he shouldn't ask for forgiveness.
Sorry?
He shouldn't ask for forgiveness. Rourke doesn't offer forgiveness in that letter.
No, but what he says, it's that someone's seeking forgiveness. It's not from me that you need it. What Wynand needs it's from himself.
Yeah.
And he has a perspective that he doesn't deserve it. And I understand that perspective, that he thinks he does
Rourke
not.
Doesn't. Rourke doesn't understand it.
Yeah, Rourke.
He has a different perspective.
Yeah.
But he would have to have a different perspective, I would think. I mean, Wynand lived the life that he lived. Rourke lived a different life. But I agree, that's one of the things that's really tragic, I think, about that, is that when you live a life, it adds up to something. And,
Do you know of any...
and it can be like, take the Peter Keating. People always ask, how come he didn't redeem himself and turn to painting or something like that? It's like, because he's lived a life, and like you said, the free will, made a series of choices throughout the whole course of his life, and you have a perspective on yourself and what you're capable of at that point. And Keating is like, he doesn't have the motivation, I think, to do more, and I think he's essentially ruined himself. I think it's more tragic with Wynand, because he had it within him to be...
Do you know of any examples in real life of Wynand? Because I couldn't find any.
Well, what do you call an example in real life? So you could ask the same for Peter Keating, and my answer to that is always yes and no. Peter Keating it's a fictional character where Ayn Rand is emphasizing a certain aspect of human character, but so fiction is highlighting a certain thing. Peter Keating is unrelentlessly second-handed on everything, with a little bit of exceptions in regard to it. And have you met someone who's so consistently second-handed on everything? I think no. But have you met people who function like this in certain areas of their life or a lot of the time? And I think, yes. Have you met a grand scale, like Winan is
a philosopher? Isn't exactly that? A philosopher, I don't mean you. I mean people in university. Isn't that exactly second-handedness? All their life?
Not necessarily.
Why would it be?
I agree. I don't say necessarily.
No,
I mean, some of them are.
But a lot of people are. Engineers, trash.
I agree.
Collectors.
So these are examples of Keating in real life.
Okay, that's what it goes back to what he was saying. What do you mean by an example? So do you, like when someone says somebody's a Babbitt, there's a character in one of, was it Sinclair Lewis novel? It's not that you meet somebody exactly like that. I use this term all the time. He's kind of a Peter Keating. It doesn't mean he's fully like that, but he exhibits that kind of second-handedness that's noticeable. And so she's helping you see features of certain people and the way they function in ways that don't jump out in the way they would with Peter Keating. But once you've been shown Peter Keating, it's easier to see second-handedness in other people, even if it's not as pronounced or consistent as it is.
Thank you.
And I don't know if Netflix counts for real life, but think about...
It does.
Have you watched Casa de Papel?
Yes.
Think about El Profesor. A guy who is so clever, why does he have to go under a career of crime? This guy could have been a multimillionaire, being, a CEO or whatever. Why does he have to go that path, which is, at the end of the day, destructive, although, okay, spoiler alert, but you don't have to do this. So there is this element that, no, just putting my mind to things is not enough. I want this extra thing of, I want to destroy this institution, blah, 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 blah. So that person reminds me Gail Winan. Like, what a brilliant mind.
That's nice.
You could have been equally, even richer and not have to hide. So why don't you just went the route of, okay, I'm not going to have victims. I'm only going to have people I trade with.
That's nice. Thank you.
Thanks.
What about Alan Greenspan? For Gail Winan.
He started off good and ended badly. Winan starts off badly.
Greenspan is Stadler, Dr. Stadler.
Hello, thank you for your interesting talks. I'm relatively new to Objectivism. I've read The Virtue of Selfishness and Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. I'm currently reading what you just spoiled, The Fountainhead.
Sorry.
Thank you for that. I'm wondering if there's a specific sequence. I would love to dive deeper into Objectivism, of books that you recommend to learn more. If there's, should I continue with Opar or...
I mean, it depends what your interest is. My recommendation is always the novels. It's The Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged, don't skip We the Living. I kind of read that last because, first novel, I already read Fountainhead. Yeah. It's a wonderful novel, wonderful story. The characters are different, the situations are different in interesting ways. It's a beautiful story. I won't tell you how many times I've read We the Living because the number's too small to be made public in the ways I've made The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. But I recently went back to reading that. The writing is just magnificent. It's surprising for a first novel. Writing, it needs no apology. It's really, really good. And similarly, a totally different kind of, well, not different in spirit, but very different in writing is Anthem. Again, it's written in almost a kind of quasi-biblical style. It's almost kind of a prose poem in a way. But it's really poetic and I think very romantic. Highly stylized, very abstract story about a world, kind of a dystopian novel about a world in which they've lost the word I. Individuals refer to themselves as we and they, and it's a story about a character who's trying to break free of that and discover his individuality. And it's like 90 pages, very short and wonderful. So you can say more about the nonfiction, but I always think the fiction is
Yeah, I would start with the fiction.
And for people who are not so much into reading, I find a lot of value from the audible versions, particularly of The Fountainhead. First, I read it on the book, but then the more I listen to it in audible, it really gets you into particularly the guy who makes the different voices for the different characters. He's very, very talented. So it's in a way, it dramatizes it, and it's obviously the book. So it's almost as if you see it in front of you. So those of you with, I don't know, attention spans, millennials.
What?
Try the audible. It's very, very good.
And another thing, just as a general recommendation, if people haven't consumed this, there was a pirated version of We the Living made into a film in fascist Italy. And Ayn Rand found out about it, was furious about it. But I think she thought the film was basically good, but they made a lot of changes in her text and stuff. And she, through legal means, had them go back and fix the stuff. But that exists. I don't know.
We're showing it at Onkar.
Oh, good.
In DC.
What a wonderful film. It's black and white. And I think the music is wonderful. The acting is very, very good. Alida Valli plays Kira in the story. It's also very romantic.
Someone said to the fascist censor, we're doing an anti-communist film, and the fascist said, okay, good. But then they saw the film and they realized, oh, this could apply to... Yeah,
and then they banned it.
Yeah, it was literally, I think, thrown away and someone found it. It has an interesting story.
Yeah.
But read the book first. Don't go first to the movie.
Okay.
Or else.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
The introduction of force.
Yeah.
Aaron, earlier in your talk, you juxtaposed reason to faith.
Yeah.
And you said reason is the only tool in the box. There's no space for faith. But I was wondering whether faith is a legitimate tool for motivational purposes. Say, for example, you're in a management context. For example, you're coaching a team and you're going into a big game against another team that you've consistently lost against. Your team has lost against them for the past few times that they met. And if you go to your players and say, okay, let's look at the evidence, they're not going to bring out the best out of them.
We're all screwed here.
Yeah. So is it immoral to go and tell them, look, have faith in yourselves, you can beat them?
Faith is the wrong word for that. So it's, you could, you're trying to motivate the best in your, I was on a wrestling team. I wasn't very good. I was so. Kind of won half, lost half. But I was on a wrestling team, and we faced a team. They killed us every year. They had a really, really good coach and stuff. And so, they were really, really good. The technique and stuff. And all I saw was the mat, So, but here we are. We're facing this thing again, and we all knew it, but the coach was saying, they're trying to rally the best in us, rally our confidence, but not fake it. It's not like, let's all, have a prayer and we're going to win it. No, it's not at all. It's just that, look, this team is really strong. But you guys have learned a lot. I've watched your development, and it's, I think you can make a strong showing, and I want to see it out there. I want to see you doing it, and you're looking back from where were you 3 months ago, and where are you now? And now you're facing some people who are really, really, really good. So I want you guys to keep your chin up, and I want you to show me what you can do. And okay, the kids are going out and they're, okay, with some confidence and stuff, but you're not faking anything, but you're trying to inspire them to the best of your abilities.
And juxtapose this to the stereotypical Greek coach who just tells you empty, oh, you're the great, let's beat them like we beat the Turks.
I had no coach telling me that. I don't know what coaches you have.
The thing is, the player will see through this. The player will see that this is he's BSing.
It's a facade.
Yeah, it's a facade. Whereas if he says, look, we have our tactic, as you said, and then you try also to boost them, then you believe him. Otherwise, if it's only faith, even the players don't take it seriously, and then they're going to end up mocking their own coach.
Yeah. And, you put it as humorous at the start. If you look at the evidence. But I think that is exactly what you tell the athletes. To look at all the evidence, including how we've prepared. And, we might play 100% and still lose. but that's what we're going to do. And if they're not at their peak, we're going to beat them this time. And that is looking at the evidence.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I make two questions? Okay, my first question is about metaphysics. Aren't we committing an act of faith when we are saying that, defending, axiomatic concepts, for example, with existence, or identity and consciousness? Aren't we committing an act of faith by believing in these concepts and defending them because they cannot be proved? For example, aren't we committing an act of faith saying that we are not in matrix and all that we can see exists in truly,
Existence is grasped perceptually. So it's not something that is capable of or requiring of proof. So faith is, I'm going to believe in something, whether or not I have a reason to believe in it or not. And its existence is not a belief that one adopts without evidence or irrespective of what you observe. It's an observed fact that you have to then conceptualize, and you can put it in a propositional form, but it's conceptualizing a fact of which we are directly aware. So proof is what you resort to when you don't have direct awareness. Direct awareness is better than proof. It's more direct than proof. That's one way in which it can be put. So it's not, I wouldn't put that, it's not an act of faith. The other part of the question was which one it was? Good.
How can we be sure that we are not in matrix and that all we can see right here, what is happening, is really happening?
Well, that's more of an issue, I think. It's that you're being offered an arbitrary claim and then being asked to consider it on its merits or something. There's no merits. So, I mean, you're being presented with an arbitrary claim. Maybe you're just a brain hooked up in a vat of nutritious liquid with electrical stimulation producing this room. What's the evidence for that?
No.
None. Right. Okay, so it's just dismiss it. What you are aware of directly is existence.
So, okay. My second question is about what Ayn Rand thinks about if it could be desirable having a women president. I think it's the one of the most controversial things I read about Ayn Rand. She said that she wouldn't ever vote a women president. Well, with some exception, but she didn't decide because she thought psychologically that femininity is the essence of worshipping man, and that a woman wouldn't be happy ever in that position. I would like to know what do you think about that, because I think she may be wrong.
You want to know what I think about that? Huh? You want to know what I think about that? Well, I don't agree with that.
No, I want to know. I want to know what you think. Yeah. What you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, would I vote for? I would vote for a woman president.
Sorry.
I would vote for a woman president. I don't know. I mean, so she's from what she said in that article. I mean, I don't know Ayn Rand, but from what she said in that article is she has certain kinds of views about. I think she's trying to project out what she thinks of a psychology would be for a woman in that position, and I think she thought, probably from introspection, that I would not want to be in that position, and so I don't have much to say about. I don't know about those. I know much about her views about that with psychology and stuff. But I mean, I would vote for a woman president if I thought they were qualified. And what was it? Leonard Peikoff said something like, "Yeah, if Thatcher was there, she would have." But I don't know.
In 1979, if you asked Ayn Rand, okay, it's Thatcher versus Heath, who was that the Labour one, she would obviously support and vote Thatcher. So I'm not even sure if the actual quote is, I would never vote for you, because obviously she would vote for Thatcher over whoever else Labour, particularly back then when Labour were hardcore socialists. So I don't think it's an issue of it's not like a political line she's passing. It's more like, as you said, a psychological, more introspective maybe even. claim.
Yeah, can I say a few things? So, one, this is not a philosophical issue. And more broadly, everything Ayn Rand said is not part of her philosophy. Philosophy is a science. It deals with certain principles, certain questions, and certain issues. This is a psychological view of hers, not a philosophical view, though it has some connections to philosophy, but most issues do have some connection. It doesn't make all the issues a philosophical issue, even if they have a philosophical aspect to them. And to take it just there's been a long standing in objectivism of taking, you can put it broadly as Ayn Rand's views on things and preferences and so on, as this is all part of the philosophy. And if I'm going to be an objectivist, I have to dye my hair orange because it seems like that's the best color hair if we take, and I mean, I've literally met people who've dyed their hair orange. And I don't think it's all like they're crazy. It's just they don't know at all how to process what it is they're responding to in Ayn Rand, what it is that they are not, and what a proper manifestation of this. So I view it as a positive. Like if you're responding positively to Howard Roark as a character, that's a really good thing. If you think what that requires is I need to be independent and have orange hair, it doesn't require. It requires the first, not the second. On the issue, so it's a psychological issue. It's not about who she would vote for. It's whether, and she's asked, if you were president, and her response to this is, I don't want to be president. And it's a very strong, I would not want to be president. It's a certain view of what the presidency is. It's not obvious that it applies to every country. It's the president as commander-in-chief of the army. There's countries that, like Canada basically doesn't have an army. I think parts of Europe don't have an army. So the idea that, oh yeah, now I'm appointed commander-in-chief of 2 boats and 8 soldiers. It's projected as it's the U.S. You're president of the U.S. She would not want to be that. But to say it's a psychological issue, not to dismiss it. I think Ayn Rand is enormously perceptive in regard to psychological issues, and she had to be as a novelist, and the kind of novelist she was. So to say that it's not a philosophical issue, just to say it's not part of the system of objectivism, that doesn't mean like everything else Ayn Rand said is crazy. But it's to be considered as, okay, this is a psychological point. And if you read that article and think about some of the examples she brings up Joan of Arc, for instance, and to think of it and to what she's projecting, and she's projecting it as a life, there's a real argument there to what she thinks is like why you wouldn't want to be in this position. And you still might not agree with it, but it's not just, oh, I asserted a preference or so on. There's a real view there about what masculinity is, what femininity is, and how to think about that and what a full expression of that would be. And you might disagree in the end. But there's a real viewpoint there, but it's a psychological view, not a philosophical.
Okay, thank you so much.
In other sciences or areas, we use like electrical circuit diagrams, like different flow charts, architecture diagrams. And I think we have seen a bit of a hierarchical chart of Onkar's presentation this morning, but generally in philosophy, it's like all text, text, and text. Is there like a fundamental reason, like in objectivism, there are some hierarchies you could visualize or conceptualize visually? Is there like a fundamental issue in philosophy, or like is it just a field that like text and concepts and language is the right tool? Or is it just like a choice that all philosophy is like in a written form?
What would be the alternative? So philosophy is a conceptual subject.
Yeah, but for example, you have the 3, I think, fundamental axioms or also core virtues, and then you have like a hierarchy. So I think there's elements where you, at least in other fields, there's like a need to visualize certain aspects. But in philosophy, it's all like language based, and I wonder if there's like some intrinsic reason of.
No, you make all these kinds of diagrams. You make it for arguments. They're often diagrammed. They're called argument maps now. It's sort of a burgeoning industry of making software that is able to do these things. And so So no, you do use diagrams and so on. You don't use math. And that makes it different than some of the other sciences. But it's that you use diagrams it's not essential to it. You could do it without it. It's a simplifying device. It's sometimes helpful. It's sometimes distorting.
I'm not sure if I get it though, because it's like you teach philosophy. There's a blackboard. I don't know any professor that just doesn't come up and you draw some lines and this is Plato's theory of forms and here's the form and you draw. So the visualization of these things is helpful. I find it helpful. But what you're diagramming though, if it was just lines and circles, what are we talking about? So it wouldn't have any content. So if you put this is the form of the good and here's a good man and here's a good action, but you're using words though. So
right, but in none of the books there's any I haven't seen any book with diagrams or pictures. It's all text. I was just curious if there's some.
Check Harry Binswanger's How We Know. I think there's a lot of. But even there's a very famous video. It's even on YouTube of Leonard Peikoff that with the 80s hair. But where it's an introduction to philosophy video, and he uses this metaphysics, and it's even visually helpful because he says after ethics you can go either the way of politics or the way of art. So it's very simple, but it still helps in terms of now I picture that I picture the hierarchy as you put it.
Okay, thanks. And I haven't seen all these examples.
Okay.
So I have a question from yesterday that I'm still thinking about with tribalism. So I see the relationship between tribalism and reason, tribalism and purpose. I'm still trying to think through tribalism and self-esteem, and I would love to hear your thoughts about that, the relationship.
Okay, so at the first level is that most people get something by participating in a tribe. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. So there is something very powerful in it. And there are many cases, anecdotal cases of people who go, let's say, to a huge political rally of people they don't like, but within 1 hour, they're cutting the energy and they end up shouting the chants of the rally, although they don't like it. So there is something there which might be enticing. But the question is, why are you attracted to that? So are you attracted because, for example, no one loves you, and now suddenly you feel, okay, finally there's a community to belong to. So this might be attractive, but at the end of the day, what good is it doing to you? Because soon you realize that, why do I need the love of, let's say, fellow Nazis, if this is the rally that you go? So when you get, the way I see it, and I see it also with dating, which is, let's say, the smallest community, that if your self-esteem is here, low, and somehow someone who is, let's say, beautiful for the wrong reasons falls in love with you, and now you feel a bit better. If in 1 month it's like, okay, turns out you're a shallow person, I'm leaving you. You don't go where you were in the beginning, you go even lower. Because you don't have self-esteem, your self-esteem comes from outside. And then this outside source is taken away, now you feel even more worthless than you felt before. So I would say, not even it doesn't give you proper self-esteem, it destroys even more the way you evaluate yourself. Because you shouldn't evaluate yourself on whether, this tribe of torch-holding white nationalists like me. That's, I would say, it's destructive to self-esteem. But if you're part of a team which is for values, and you're there for the right reasons, and you get appreciated because of the work you put in, then that should indeed. So, for example, I'm very happy when people I respect like my work. It's not where I get my self-esteem, but it's a very nice boost. It's like, okay, I have reasons why I like these people. I did good work, which was not a scam. They appreciate it, therefore, thumbs up. So this would be self-esteem boosting, but that's not tribalism.
If you want to read something on this that's related, the Ayn Rand's essay on racism, which is in The Virtue of Selfishness, talks about racism and a form of pseudo-self-esteem, so that real self-esteem, as Nikos was saying, comes from actual achievements. It comes from you as an individual having done something rational and good, worthwhile. You view it like that, and you're expecting other people to view it like that. If the projection that you think that what is significant about other people, but that means about yourself as well, is tribal characteristics, and race is one of the that gets my skin color. That's what's significant about me and other people. Or it's I mean, as she puts racism, it's your genetic lineage. So I'm a member of the Kennedys or of the Canada's idiot Prime Minister Trudeau. His claim to fame, the reason he's qualified to be president is because his father was a president. He's got no skills, no knowledge. That's how he should view himself. It's a form of pseudo self-esteem. No, I deserve the presidency because my name's Trudeau. And that's a form of seeking pseudo self-esteem. And I think tribalism is often that as well. And they get a boost. It's not a real boost. It's a fraudulent attempt to get a boost.
5 more minutes, so let's take 2 more.
This is about the first talk on Friday. There was the point that free will and opposed to that the nature versus nurture debate. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how the negation of free will generates that.
Negation of free will generates what?
The nature versus nurture dichotomy.
Oh, well, it's if what's causally significant about a person, and if you're trying to understand him, his ideas, his values, what he is as a person, in the sense of his ideas and values, if it's not a product of his choices, the question is, well, what is it a product of? And the two answers are, it's a product of his genetics, and that's nature, or it's a product of his environment, and that's nurture. And the sophisticated position is a product of both. But what they've erased from the causal, that plays any causal role, is the person's choice. And that's because they think there's no such thing as free will. So there is no such causal role. We haven't overlooked anything. And it is true that to understand a person is certainly his environment, how he's brought up, how he's been educated, what he's learned is relevant. It's much more relevant at what he does in that environment and what he chooses to do and how he thinks and what conclusions he reaches. And similarly, there can be roles for genetics as well. But all of that has to be processed in the context of what fundamentally drives a person is the choices he makes. And what are the choices he makes given what he is genetically and the environment that he's in. But if there's no free will, then that explains everything. Nature, nurture, or some combination. And that's by far the dominant view.
Thank you.
Last question.
Yeah, thank you. Should free countries trade with non-free countries? So, for example, should the US and other Western countries trade with, say, China?
I could say a word on that. I don't think you can answer the question at that level of abstraction. So what's an unfree country, first of all? Is it any country that departs from full freedom? And if the answer is yes, that's what an unfree country is, then yes, you certainly can trade with other countries. But even if you go to no, it's a welfare state or it's a dictatorship, it depends on what the context is in a foreign policy of how much of a threat it is militarily and what your foreign policy is. So even in regard to China, which I think is a real military threat, if our foreign policy was, that is the US foreign policy was, and more broadly the Western foreign policy was, we regard the Chinese government as evil. Its leaders do not deserve their positions. They should all resign or be overthrown. We're not at war with the Chinese people. And it's good for China and the Chinese people that they, compared to what they had under Mao, that they have more freedom and they are way more prosperous than they were. And so, and if your foreign policy was to try to drive a wedge between the Chinese government and the Chinese people, and yet you would support the Chinese people if they rebelled against the government. So that in that context that you say you can trade with China, I think it's much harder. But then there's no answer to our foreign policy. We have no clue what we're doing in regard to foreign policy. And then if you ask for any concrete thing, what should we do? I don't know, we don't have any principles about what we're doing for anything. So there's no answer in that context. But I think in the context, if we had a rational foreign policy, yes, even for countries like China, there's a possibility. The answer is yes, we could trade, but it has to be not if we treat the government as this is a respectable form of government.
And also would be so for example, shall my government allow me to go to Iran? I think the answer should be yes, as an individual. Now, if I get arrested, shall my country go to war with Iran? The answer, I think, should be no. If the country had the line, look, this is a very bad regime, don't go to Iran, we don't recommend you visit Iran, but I think if I wanted to visit, I don't know, my girlfriend is stuck there, I want to take her out, whatever, I think I should have, the government shouldn't tell me, no, you cannot go. But since once I go there, because they don't have relationship with that unfree regime, the idea would be if you go there and something bad happens, you're on your own.
So Iran's I don't know if you meant that as a kind of generic example. Yeah, I would use something like Venezuela. Iran has been at war with the U.S. for 20, 30 plus, and we just don't know it. Whereas Venezuela is not a threat, but it is a dictatorship.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's it for this session.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to never miss a video.